Hey, how's it going? My name's Liam Wynn. Some of you know me already, but I'm the host of the Vertical Thoughts Rock Climbing Podcast. And I've been talking a lot, especially in my podcast recently, about ways to expand vertical thoughts into different sources of rock climbing media. I want to share all different kinds of rock climbing media on Vertical Thoughts and share, things with you that I am passionate about. And I was given an idea, and it was even maybe a joke, but I was speaking with a friend. We were very mildly inebriated. We'll call it buzzed. And he said to me, again, possibly even jokingly, I'll never know, but he said, "Hey man, why don't you just talk? I'll just put in my earbuds and, go to sleep and you just talk for as long as you want." And what it was is basically people like listening to me talk. That's what I've heard anyways from the podcast starting. And the development of the show is people have, given me appreciation and praise for whatever kind of weird vocal or verbal gift I've been given, where you like hearing, maybe it's tonal even, maybe you just like the tone of my voice, that's fine. But that gave me an idea. I don't know what defines or excludes something from being an audiobook, but maybe you could call this an audiobook. We are going to be reading together this right here. Alone on the Wall by Alex Honnold with David Roberts. It's a biographical or maybe even autobiographical piece wherein Alex Honnold, who we all know, and Alex Honnold, this guy climbs big rocks without the use of ropes. Not always, but sometimes he does that, and we like to watch it, as seen in the major motion picture from National Geographic, Free Solo. And that has kind of pushed this book into the spotlight recently, and I've been wanting to read this because I want to get inside Alex Honnold's head a little bit. Just his head, nothing else. And I want to learn a little bit more about him as a climber and his thought process, because it's very, very interesting to me, and I'm sure it is to some of you too. So if you haven't read this yet, here's a good excuse to not have to go buy it or rent it or whatever, because I bought it for you, and we're going to read it together. And again, maybe you could call this an audiobook. I am going to be inserting some of my thoughts, hopefully not too many of them, but I do want to kind of annotate things and break this down with you guys a little bit. I have very little expertise about free soloing or even sport climbing in general, so I'm going to give you a pretty limited perspective, but Alex is going to give you a glorious and well-experienced perspective. So we're going to go chapter by chapter. They're fairly long. I think the first chapter is 22 pages, something like that. And I don't know how long these are going to be. There is video. If you're just listening to this, there is video posted on YouTube, but it's just of the book. And it's not even going to be perfectly well framed. And my hands, those are my hands. I like them. They're okay. I was born with them, so you get used to what you got. Poor worksman blames his tools, I guess. But this is Alone on the Wall by Alex Honnold and David Roberts. Who cares about who published it? I mean, I'm sure some people do, but I kind of don't. Not for this purpose anyways. But we're just going to go chapter by chapter. Read along with me, or rather just listen, sit back. You can go to sleep if you want. You can take your own notes even. Tell me what you think about this book. Tell me what you think about this idea as well. If you think me reading this book to you is it a good idea. This is not part of the Vertical Thoughts podcast. This is kind of its own separate thing. And hopefully as we move along here, we're going to have a lot of other separate things that are different from just the podcast, but that are still part of the whole Vertical Thoughts thing. The goal eventually is to turn Vertical Thoughts into a source for all kinds of rock climbing media, be it visual, audio, whatever. And we're going to hope my cats don't interrupt me too rudely, although I would not get your hopes up. So maybe just if you hear some cats in the background, it adds to the ambiance. This is the effect that I was going for. It's just a cat-filled room full of jerk cats. There's actually only two of them. I got my water here in my Vertical Thoughts crystal etched glass. I don't know if you can even see that, but I love those. I got them for the show, but you can't really see them on the video. Anyways, that's enough from me, right? I know what you're thinking. Liam, read the book. No one cares. Read the book. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to get into this. Okay, so chapter 1 is called Moonlight. Sorry for preemptively, I apologize for the throat clears. It's just the nature of it. We're reading a ton here, so. I started up the climb shortly after dawn. I wasn't even sure that I'd found the right start, since I hadn't been on these lower pitches for 2 or 3 years. The beginning of the route is kind of scruffy and ambiguous. Ramps, traverses, and hand cracks angling up to the right. But it's not as difficult as the upper 2/3 of the wall. Still, I was nervous, even a little giddy. It had rained pretty much nonstop the day before, and now the rock was sandy, slabby, and a lot damper than I had hoped. Now, I want to stop already. I know what you're thinking. Seriously? You made it one paragraph before inserting your whatever you're doing. So still, I was nervous and even a little giddy. I did like that very much watching Free Solo, just Alex Honnold's giddiness when doing what he is very passionate about. That is a great way to describe it. I'm glad that he knows himself. That's some good inflection. I probably should have waited another day before heading up the route, but I was overpsyched. You guys ever get like that? Like you're just too psyched. You just want to do something so bad you know you shouldn't, but you do. We all do that. So if you just said no to that, you need to start, doing some thinking. I couldn't bear the thought of sitting in my van another whole day, thinking the same thoughts I had recycled for the past 48 hours. I had to strike while the iron was hot. Moonlight Buttress is a 1,200... I just got chills, man. Strike while the iron was hot. I'm sorry, I'm not going to stop this much. Moonlight Buttress is a 1,200-foot-high, nearly vertical sandstone cliff in Utah's Zion National Park. It may be the finest, the purest, and most classic route among Zion's thousands of lines. It's also one of the most continuously difficult crack climbs in the world. The first ascent of Moonlight Buttress came in October 1971. I remember it like it was yesterday. When Jeff Lowe and Mike Weiss, the two legends of American climbing, pioneered the route. It took them a day and a half with an overnight bivouac. I don't know how to say that word. I apologize. I know what it is. It's basically some form of camp that is not covered. So in this case, just a portaledge. They used a lot of aid, pulling or hanging on expansion bolts and pitons. Nearly 21 years later, in April 1992, Peter Croft and Johnny Woodward made the first free ascent as they took all the aid out of the route by finding sequences of moves they could climb without hanging on gear. They solved the rite in 9 pitches, or rope lengths, but rated the climb a really stiff 513A, since downgraded to 512D. In 1992, that was near the upper limit of free climbing difficulty anywhere in the world, and Croft and Woodward's feat was a brilliant one. Peter Croft was already one of my heroes because in the 1980s and 90s, he had pushed free soloing, climbing without a rope or gear at all, to unprecedented extremes. Many of the routes he'd free soloed back then had never been repeated in that style during the decades since. But as far as I knew, no one had even thought of free soloing Moonlight Buttress. That's what I was hoping to pull off on April 1st, 2008. I'm going to take a brief pause here to take the squeaky toy away from my cat before she ruins this for all of us. So just 1 second. Just wait right there. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. I had to take the squeaky toy from her because I heard her get a little pause on it, and I knew that just incessant squeaking was going to follow, and that would really disrupt things here. So also, in my journeys downstairs to confiscate the squeaky toy from my cat, I remembered how to pronounce this word on page 2 that I had previously forgotten how to pronounce. It's bivouac. And again, I told you what it is. It's basically a form of shelter or a camp that's uncovered, I guess, sort of like a portaledge in this case. But it's pronounced almost exactly how it's spelled, which always throws me off. Words that have that many vowels commonly are pronounced just totally ambiguously. But it's, again, bivouac. And I believe it's just bivouac. I really think that's how you pronounce it. Or bivouac. Something like that. But just a portaledge. So anyways, back into it here. I'll go back one paragraph just to recap. But as far as I knew, no one had even thought of free soloing Moonlight Buttress. That's what I was hoping to pull off on April 1st, 2008. In the back of my mind was a nagging worry about the feature called rocker blocker. It's an ample ledge, about half the size of a queen-sized bed, at the top of the 3rd pitch. Because it's loose, somebody had chained it in place with a 2-bolt anchor, but it actually makes for a good stance about 400 feet off the ground. It wasn't the ledge itself that fueled my angst. From the rocker blocker, stretching on tiptoe, you can just reach a key hold above. Essentially, you face a 512C boulder problem right off the ledge. It's interesting that he said a boulder problem, but then he graded it 512C. Just breaking that down a little bit. You don't actually have a jump to make... Sorry, you don't actually have to make... Just reset my brain. You don't actually have to jump to make the move, but it's more like an upward lurch to a small edge. As I climbed the easy pitches down low, that move loomed over me. I'm pretty sure I could stick the ledge if I fell off, but I'd sure hate to find out. Yeah, that would be horrifying, even if he managed to fall onto the ledge. The day before, sitting in my van in the rain, I had deliberately visualized everything that might happen on the climb, including breaking a hold or just losing it and falling off. I saw myself bouncing off the ledge below and going all the way to the ground, fracturing most of my bones as I ragdolled down the mountain. I'd probably bleed out at the base. I love how candid he is with things like this, and it's very interesting to me that he visualizes all these possibilities. I guess you have to kind of quantify what's going to happen or what might happen before you can assess the risks fully, so that I appreciate that he will actually visualize every bone in his body breaking and him ragdolling down the mountain. That's very powerful, in my opinion anyways. That would talk me right out of doing whatever I was about to do, but not him. I hadn't slept very well the previous night, so I got the early start in the morning that I'd planned, hoping to beat the sun to the wall and get cool conditions on the route. To reach the base of Moonlight Buttress, you have to wade the Virgin River, which in early April was freezing-ass cold. I love that. Freezing-ass cold. There's a hyphen in there somewhere. I forded the stream barefoot. Also, the use of the word forded. Amazing. The rushing water came up above my knees. My feet quickly went numb, and my whole body went into mild shock. Plus, I had to pay attention to my balance as I placed my feet carefully in the gaps between polished river cobbles. Also, Polished River Cobbles is my band name, I call it. At what I thought was the start of Moonlight Buttress, I cached my approach shoes in my day pack. I decided to carry nothing, neither food nor water, nor spare clothes up the route. I clipped on my chalk bag and laced up my rock shoes. My feet were still cold, but they weren't truly numb. I could feel my toes all right. I was wearing only shorts and a t-shirt. Hot. At the last minute, I put on headphones and turned up my iPod. Wow, it was a blast from the past. It was 2008, I guess. I was shuffling through my own top 25 playlist of tunes, mostly punk and modern rock. I want to know the song that he was listening to when he soloed Moonlight Buttress. Maybe he doesn't remember. You never know. A lot of adrenaline going through there. It may sound lame, but I didn't have a watch, and I was pretty sure I was going to set the speed record for Moonlight Buttress. I love how casual he is about that. I was pretty sure I was going to set the speed record. It was bound to happen. I could use the iPod to measure exact number of minutes the climb would take. Music also has a way of helping you focus, although nowadays I prefer to climb without my iPod because I consider it a bit of a crutch. Very interesting. So music to him has developed from a tool used to focus now to a crutch. I wish that they delved even a little bit deeper into that, but they don't. For me, free soloing a big wall is all about preparation. In a real sense, I had performed the hard work on Moonlight Buttress during the days leading up to the climb. Once I was on the route, it was just a matter of executing. Yes, I'd climbed the whole route only once before, with a philosophy professor named Bill Ramsey. In his mid-40s, he was still climbing really well, and he'd been working on freeing Moonlight. He recruited me to climb it with him for his free attempt, and we swung leads up the whole route. It was a great day, as we both climbed the route clean with no falls. But that was 2 or 3 years earlier. In the days before my free solo attempt, I'd focus on the upper 800 feet of the route. It's a mellow hike along a paved trail to the top of Moonlight Buttress, so I hauled up 600 feet of rope, rappelled down it, and practiced the moves on top rope. To self-belay, I used a device called a mini traxion. Traxion. I don't know how to pronounce that really accurately. Again, here we are at this crossroads where Liam can't pronounce things. Welcome to Liam Can't Pronounce Words with Alex Honnold. Which grips the rope on a downward pole but slides effortlessly up the rope as you climb. If I fell or even rested, the mini traxion would hold me tight. With my top rope, I climbed the upper 600 feet of Moonlight Buttress twice. The crux of the whole route, the hardest single passage, which is the make-or-break stretch of an ascent, is an amazing clean inside corner, 180 feet long. It's the fourth of 9 pitches on the route, and it's what gives the climb its 512D rating. It's continuous and really strenuous, so your arms get pretty pumped by the time you reach the top of it. Each top-roped rehearsal of those upper 600 feet had taken me only about an hour. I felt super solid. At no point did I fall off or even feel sketchy, but then I realized that the 600-foot rope didn't reach down to a crucial 511C rightward traverse on the third pitch. So the next day, I went back up to the top with 800 feet of rope, wrapped down again, and rehearsed the traverse moves until I had them dialed too. I ran into a few other climbers in my practice runs. I even rescued an aid climbing chick who didn't quite know what she was doing and had gotten stuck on her lead. I yelled, "Hey, grab this rope," as I swung the tail of my fixed rope to her so she could liberate herself from her trap. That's beautiful verbiage there to describe being stuck on a wall, who knows how many feet up in the air, just liberating herself from her trap. Her trap, she put herself there. She was pretty grateful. It's not every day that someone comes rapping out of the sky on a route like that. Then came 2 days of rain. I sat in my van in a movie theater parking lot in Springdale, stared out the windshield and thought. I'd gone to a movie to pass the time, but the rest of the day into the evening and through most of the second day I sat in the van just thinking. It's not like I had work to do. I didn't have anything to do except think about the climb. Sitting and thinking, hour after hour, visualizing every single move, everything that could possibly happen. That's what it takes to wrap your mind around a challenge such as the one I was about to attempt. That's what I mean by preparation. Now I'd find out if I prepared adequately, if I could simply execute what I'd visualized, every handhold and foothold along the way to the top of the wall. There's a gift that many sport climbers have. I don't know if it's a gift or if it's some kind of trade secret, but being able to visualize every hand and foothold along the way. I personally can't do that. Share your thoughts with me on that in the comment section below. If you can personally visualize every hand and foothold of a route climb that you've attempted in the past or something that you've projected, that seems incredible to me. But then again, I don't have much experience with big walls, so maybe it's more attainable than I think. At the end of March 2008, Alex Honnold was little known beyond the small circle of his friends. So I suppose these are no longer in first person. These aren't Alex's words anymore. Perhaps these are David Roberts' words. It's not specified, but you have to assume. 7 years later, at the age of 30, he is probably the most famous climber in the world. And that's not to claim that he's the best climber in the world. In fact, there's no such thing as the best climber because the sport has subdivided into so many genres, from Himalayan mountaineering to bouldering in indoor gyms. The reason for Honnold's meteoric celebrity is that he's pushed the most extreme and dangerous form of climbing, far beyond the limits of what anyone thought was possible. Free soloing means climbing without a rope, a partner, or any hardware, pitons, nuts, or cams, to attach oneself to the wall. In its stark simplicity, that pursuit can be understood by the most casual observer. The stakes are ultimate. If you fall, you die. I do like the phrase stark simplicity because that definitely describes free soloing to me anyways. It's incredibly basic. It's just climb upwards. If you don't, you'll die. Very good writing here. What Alex has done is to free solo routes both longer and of much greater difficulty than anyone before him had thought possible. So far, he's gotten away with it, though some of his closest friends are afraid that he's going to kill himself. Free soloing is far more than a stunt. It amounts to reducing climbing to its most elemental challenge, a man or woman with only rock shoes on his or her feet and chalk on his or her fingertips for better purchase against the cliff. It's climbing at its absolute purest. I like that, climbing at its absolute purest. I also like the phrase better purchase against the cliff. I enjoy David's writing. I'm just going to throw that out there. David, well done. This is not the only kind of climbing that Alex does, however. His speed link-ups, enchainments of 2 or 3 big wall climbs back-to-back against the stopwatch, with only a minimal reliance on ropes or protection, have rewritten the book in Yosemite. And since 2013, Alex has expanded his horizons to mountaineering, where he's already doing things no one else has managed to pull off. Alex Honnold, in short, is a climbing visionary of the sort who comes along maybe once in a generation. He's also funny, smart, a man with surprisingly little ego, and a person who wants to make the world a better place for people less privileged or talented than he is. Nearly everyone who knows or even just watches Alex likes him because, as John Krakauer says, he's utterly genuine. There's no bullshit there. I do like that a lot. I got that vibe from watching the movie Free Solo. I've never really had any kind of deep conversation with Alex. I've met him in person once, but he does strike me as utterly genuine. Again and again, whenever he speaks in public, Alex is asked the same 2 questions by everyone from little kids to graybeards. They used graybeards to describe, I'm assuming, just elderly people. Indeed, they are the fundamental questions about what he's doing on rock. They are, aren't you afraid you're going to die? And why do you do this? In a sense, those questions are unanswerable. They lie in the realm of George Lee Mallory's throwaway response in 1923 to the umpteenth journalist who asked him why he wanted to climb Everest. Because it is there. Though intended as an irritable jab by a man fed up with the question, Mallory's quip has become the most famous quotation in mountaineering history. Alex has come up with his own quips to answer the inevitable questions. About falling to his death, it'll be the worst 4 seconds of my life. And I'm sure half the people will say, at least he died doing what he loved best, and the other half will say, what a fucking douche. Nice, Alex. Alex is unmistakably a driven, competitive fellow, yet his modesty, born of an innate shyness, takes the form of a radical understatement of his accomplishments, verging, like the quips above, on self-deprecation. I like that a lot, actually. I talked to someone recently about this, how someone had said to me, well, that's negative. I don't remember what it was. I think it was the phrase, this was my friend Liz, now that I think about it, and it was the phrase, shit happens. And she said, well, that's negative. Why would you want to surround yourself with that kind of negativity? Some people's minds really flourish on self-deprecation, me included. The self-deprecating humor boosts me up, if anything, which is interesting because not everyone is like that. Maybe some people can't separate, self-deprecation from actual self-deprecation, or the humor side of it is too close maybe to being actually self-deprecating, which is harmful to your psyche. His nickname among his closest climbing buddies is Alex No Big Deal Honnold. I'm pretty sure the D does not stand for deal. Sorry. In the last 40 years, only a handful of climbers have pushed free soloing to the razor edge of risk. Half of them are dead. Some of those soloists have survived their decades of dancing above the abyss. They include not only Peter Croft, but also Henry Barber, who crisscrossed the globe in the 1970s, blowing the minds of locals at crags from Wales to Australia by flashing their hardest routes. Others died when a single mistake caught up to them. Among their number was Derek Hersey, a Brit transplanted to the States, who fell to his death in 1993 on the Stek Salath route in Yosemite. I'm going to mispronounce things, so let's just get used to that real quick. Possibly because a rainstorm slickened the holds. Dan Osman, Charlie Fowler, and Michael Reardon also died in accidents related to their pursuit of extreme exploits on cliffs and mountains. But the demise that most shocked the climbing world was that of John Bakar, with Peter Croft, one of the two outstanding soloists of the 1980s and 90s. Yeah, the John Bakar thing was a big deal. If you don't know who John Bakar is, I would do some research. Phenomenal climber, and for me, a very personally motivating person. I have no desire to free solo, but just his attitudes in general really resonate with me. Very sad death in climbing, by the way. After 35 years of climbing the route after route without a rope, Bakar fell off a short climb he had done many times before, on a route near his home in Mammoth Lakes, California, in July 2009. I was not climbing at the time in 2009, so I wasn't personally shaken by this news, but even later on down the line, retroactively, it was very upsetting to learn about. Alex points out that none of this group of elite climbers died while pushing their limits at free soloing. Hersey and Bakar fell off routes that would normally have been well within their capacities. There was speculation that a spinal problem had caused his left arm and shoulder suddenly to weaken, the result of a recent car accident. Might have caused Bakar's fatal last fall. Reardon was swept to his death by a rogue wave after he had soloed down the base of a sea cliff in Ireland. Interesting, I didn't know that, actually. So he was down climbing a sea cliff that he had already climbed up. Interesting. Fowler died in an avalanche as he attempted an unclimbed mountain in western China. Osman met his end while pushing to new extremes a sport he had virtually invented, rope jumping, or deliberately leaping off a cliff to be caught by the rope or ropes he was tied into. That, I don't have much to say about that. Dan Osman was the man, don't get me wrong. He was awesome, but that is nuts to me. I'm sure he knew that too. Also, that's probably why he enjoyed it so much. Having set a record jump of more than 1,000 feet, Osman died when his rope broke on a plunge off Leaning Tower in Yosemite. Still, all 5 of those extreme free soloists were out there on the cutting edge of adventure when they perished. Osman, in effect, discovered the boundaries of rope jumping by paying for the experiment with his life. That's interesting. So think about something that you're passionate about, something that you personally want more than anything else, and then thinking about sacrificing your life in order to better research that. That's putting it in incredibly simple terms, but in essence, that's what Osman did. You know, he paid for it with his life, and now we know more. Though still alive and well at 62, Henry Barber came perilously close to falling to his death in the early 1980s, as he was filmed free soloing a British sea cliff route for an American TV show. Distracted by a nearby cameraman's sudden movement, Barber lost his balance, as he later described that moment. And these are now Henry Barber's words. "It caught me the wrong way. I was doing some stemming moves, pushing with both hands against the sides of the groove. I pushed just a little too hard and my left shoulder bumped the wall so that I started to fall. Adrenaline shot from my toes right up to my head. I was off and headed down, but the balance and flow of all the movement that had gone on up until that point carried me through, keeping me on the rock and still moving." So he, in his own words, I doesn't ever actually, at least in this quote, doesn't actually mention the cameraman. Maybe that's when he says it caught me the wrong way. Perhaps it was just he maybe was already slipping, and then the movement caught him off guard. I don't know. Interesting. I wonder what happened there as far as the cameraman's involvement in that issue. With his sharp intelligence, Alex inclines towards a hyper-rational take on his life. He actually insists, "I don't like risk. I don't like passing over double yellow. I don't like rolling the dice." That's hilarious. He distinguishes between consequences and risk. Obviously, the consequences of a fall while free soloing are ultimate ones, but that doesn't mean, he argues, that he's taking ultimate risks. As he puts it, "I always call risk the likelihood of actually falling off. The consequence is what will happen if you do. So I try to keep my soloing low risk, as in I'm not likely to fall off, even though there'd be really high consequences if I did. Now, this is actually very interesting and something that I subscribe to as well, the risk versus reward, or in this case, risk versus consequence. If you are putting yourself at risk, is there a great consequence or great reward? And in him, or at least in his mind, the balance has been struck with free soloing. Just as rational, on the other hand, are some of the arguments made by close friends of Alex who worry about the chances he's taking. 7 years Alex's senior, Tommy Caldwell has been his partner on marathon link-ups and mountaineering expeditions. One of the best rock climbers in the world, as well as one of the role models Alex most admires, Caldwell said in 2011, "I've never tried to free solo anything really grand. I've fallen completely unexpectedly lots of times, maybe a dozen, on relatively easy terrain, when a hold broke off or the rubber peeled off the sole of my shoe or something. If I'd been soloing, I'd have died. I really like Alex, and I don't want him to die." Those of you who remember Tommy Caldwell's interview in the Free Solo movie, you really get to see the emotions that he feels through this. I mean, even bringing him to tears in front of a camera, which I'm sure is, there's some kind of powerful emotions at play in his relationship with Alex. I highly respect Tommy Caldwell. He's one of my all-time favorite climbers, and he's a big softie. I just want to give him a hug. Those are my notes on that. By now, the audience Alex commands stretches far beyond the ranks of hardcore climbers. He's known, for instance, as that kid Lara Logan interviewed on 60 Minutes, or as the guy in that amazing photo on the cover of National Geographic. But for non-climbers fully to understand exactly what Alex is doing, a brief primer in techniques, gear, and grade ratings is necessary. In conventional rock climbing, a pair of climbers is connected with a nylon rope, usually about 60 meters, almost 200 feet in length. One climber, anchored safely to the wall, belays the leader as he climbs above. To minimize the consequences of the fall, the leader places protection, or pro, as he goes. Throughout most of the history of rock climbing, the leader would hammer a piton, any of an assortment of differently shaped metal spikes, firstly made of iron, but now improved with chrome molybdenum steel alloy, into a natural crack in the rock surface. Once the piton was firmly driven, the leader clipped a carabiner, an oval link with a spring-loaded gate, into the eye of the piton, then fed the rope through the beaner. That way, if he fell, say 5 feet above the piton, the belayer on the other end of the rope could stop his fall after a plunge of a little more than 10 feet. The additional footage due to the stretchiness of the nylon rope, which also cushions the jolt. By the 1980s, pitons had become passé, except in big range mountaineering, because their repeated hammering as they were driven home and then pried loose damaged the rock, leaving ugly pin scars. Instead, climbers started using nuts, variously shaped blobs of metal that could be slotted into cracks and wrinkles in the rock so they'd hold tight under a downward pull. Nuts, in general, are much less secure than pitons. In the late 1970s, Ray Jardine invented ingenious devices he called friends, now more generically referred to as cams. They're spring-loaded gizmos with opposing semicircular plates. Sorry about my phone, by the way. You pull a kind of trigger that retracts the plates, slot the cam into a crack that wouldn't hold a nut, then release the trigger. The spring allows the plates to grip the edges of a crack, and a well-placed cam can hold weights of thousands of pounds. Needless to say, cams have revolutionized rock climbing. From the earliest days onward, climbers surmounted otherwise unclimbable stretches of rock by using their pro as artificial holds. This is called direct aid, or simply aid. Whole pitches of aid can be negotiated with étriers or aiders, nylon slings with 3 or 4 foot loops to make flexible ladders. The aid climber hangs an aider from a piton or nut or cam, then climbs the nylon rungs rather than the rock itself. Eventually, expansion bolts enlarge the technical arsenal. In blank rock devoid of cracks, the climber bores a hollow sleeve, either by hammer or mechanical drill. Into this sleeve, he then hammers the cylindrical bolt, usually made of stainless steel. A hanger, similar to the eye of a piton, is affixed to the head of the bolt. Then the climber attaches a carabiner to the hanger and clips in his rope. A good bolt is as strong as the best piton. Free climbing, as opposed to free soloing, means that the leader uses his protection only to safeguard a fall. He does not slot a nut or cam and then pull on it to move upward. He climbs the rock with only his hands and feet, but if he falls on solid pro, he's not likely to be injured. In the United States, rock routes climbed free are rated on a scale of difficulty called the Yosemite Decimal System, that currently ranges from 5.1 to 5.15. The reason for the awkward numbering is that in the US, experts long believed that no climbs harder than 5'9" would ever be accomplished. By the late 1960s, however, that limit had been transcended, and the classifiers felt they had no choice but to invent 5'10". The system is inherently conservative, so the higher grades such as 513 have been subdivided into 4 classes of their own, ranging from 513A through 513D. Top-notch climbers recognize that there is as great a gap in difficulty between 513B and C as between 5'8 and 5'9. At the moment, the hardest climbs in the world, of which there are only a handful, are rated 515C. In the last 20 years, expansion bolts have given rise to the phenomenon of sport climbing, as distinguished from trad, short for traditional, in which climbers place and remove nuts and cams for protection. On a sport route, permanent bolts placed as closely as 6 or 8 feet apart, often driven on rappel before the route has been attempted, allow climbers to get up very hard, free routes on rock that won't take cams or nuts, with almost bomb-proof safety. The leader simply clips into one bolt after another as he climbs. For the belayer, catching the leader's fall is routine. Sport climbing has skyrocketed in popularity in the recent years, and perhaps that's because of the development of equipment that makes it much more accessible and even safer than it has been ever before. There are now hotshot teenagers who can climb 514 sport routes, but who have never led a single pitch of trad and wouldn't have a clue how to do so. Because the Yosemite Decimal System's 5.1 to 5.15 measures only the pure difficulty of the hardest move, nearly all of the top-rated climbs in the world are on short sport routes on easily accessible crags. To put up a 5.15 route, an expert such as Chris Sharma or Adam Andra will work the sequence of moves for weeks or even months on end, falling harmlessly hundreds of times before he can complete the climb in one try without a single fall. That kind of climbing is so specialized that the Andras of the world practice almost no other art. Ironically then, trad climbing is more sporting than sport climbing, and more daring and dangerous. But free soloing is another whole game. I wonder why that's not a whole other game. Interesting. When Alex Honnold performs one of his long free solos, he does away altogether with ropes, with a partner to catch his fall, with pro of any kind, no bolts, pitons, nuts, or cams, to use for artificial holds or to safeguard a fall. Because the chances of falling on even a 5'11 or 5'12 climb are considerable, only a few practitioners have dared to push free soloing beyond the 5'11 level. And then, usually on short routes and only after rehearsing the line by climbing it with a rope and a partner many times to memorize every hold in sequence. For that matter, when you're climbing without a rope, you can fall off and die on a 5'4 route if a handhold or foothold breaks loose. I do think people disassociate from that risk, that outdoor sport climbing is dangerous in general, and people die relatively frequently, injuries even more so, even just doing easy sport climbs with protection and with bolts. Free soloing, then, is the most sporting, the purest form of rock climbing ever devised. So it's interesting, they're actually making sporting and purest form of rock climbing. Those two are synonymous in the rider's eyes. What do you think about that? Do you think that the most sporting is also the most purest form of climbing, or do you think that the most sporting is the most widely viewed or the most difficult or challenging? What are your thoughts on what is the most sporting form of rock climbing? It's the ultimate adventure on rock, with the ultimate stakes if you make the slightest mistake. People ask me all the time how I got into free soloing, but I don't think they quite believe me when I give an honest answer. So now we're back into Alex Honnold's first person words. The truth is that when I started climbing outdoors, I was too shy to go up to strangers at a crag and ask if they'd like to rope up with me. Now this, they mentioned this in the free solo movie. This is bananas to me, that he started free soloing because he was too shy to ask for someone to belay him. Now, while I say that's bananas, I don't mean that the fact that he was too shy to ask someone to belay him is bananas, because me, growing up with pretty severe social anxiety, I totally understand that. I mean, even when I started climbing in a gym, I would not ask for someone to belay me or to help me or to, even to teach me how to climb. I often felt uncomfortable asking for when I started climbing. It's just something that people with social anxiety experience on a day-to-day basis. It's not limited to rock climbing. It's every situation. What's bananas to me is that he was able to mentally justify, because he could not ask for strangers to rope up with him. He was like, I'll just climb without ropes. Whatever. That's bonkers to me. But again, we're getting inside the mind of Alex Honnold, and hopefully we learn a little bit more about how he's able to mentally justify that. Although we already have learned a lot about that. I first started climbing at age 10 at an indoor gym in my hometown of Sacramento, California. But I did very little outdoors before the age of 19. I was so antisocial and tweaky that I was actually afraid to talk to strangers. Though I was already climbing 513, I would never have gotten up the nerve to approach other guys at a crag like Lover's Leap near Lake Tahoe and ask if I could rope up with them. So I just started soloing. So I just started going. I just climbed the routes. It's so simple in his mind. The first route I did was a low-angle 5.5 slab called Knapsack Crack at Lover's Leap. Then I tackled a much steeper 3-pitch route called Corrugation Corner, rated 5.7. I overgripped the shit out of it because I was really scared and climbing badly. Now that I will say, if I ever free solo, I'm probably going to make my own holds with how hard I am holding the rock. I mean, I will take a crimp and just shape it into a jug with my overgrip because that shit's scary, bro. But I quickly got better. I've always been a compulsive ticker. From the very start, I kept a bound notebook in which I recorded every climb I did, each one with a brief note. My climbing Bible, as I called it, was my most precious possession. Imagine what it would be like to read through that, by the way. Just food for thought. In 2005 and 2006, I did tons of routes at Joshua Tree, on the granite boulders and pinnacles in the desert east of Los Angeles. I developed a voracious appetite for soloing. I'd do as many as 50 pitches in a day, mostly on short routes up to 510. A sample entry from my Bible. Now, before we read that, 50 pitches in a day free soloing is, again, we're going to throw the word bananas out there. That's nuts. I can't do 50 pitches in a week, probably, with aid. I'm weak, though, so whatever. Okay, so October 7th, 2005, 18 pitches, kind of a low day. He said, kind of a low day. I know it's not focused, you can't read that, but bonkers. 5.7 to 5.10B. I couldn't start the left peyote crack. Weird. Yes. Weird. I soon got so that I felt pretty comfortable soloing. I discovered that if I had any particular gift, it was a mental one, the ability to keep it together in what might otherwise have been a stressful situation. By 2007, I had soloed a few pitches, up to 512A in difficulty. I felt like I was ready for the next big step. And if you're not a climber or if you don't climb sport, 512A is hard. That's a hard climb. Just to give you some reference, I don't really have a number to equate it to in bouldering. Some people try to equate the grades in bouldering to sport. They don't translate exactly, though, so it becomes, just know that 512A is very difficult. Still, back then, I had no thought of becoming a professional climber or even of attracting any attention for what I did. In September 2007, I went to Yosemite. I had my eye on two legendary routes, the north face of Rostrum, a beautiful 800-foot granite pillar, rated 511C, and Astro Man on Washington Column, a touchstone 1,100-foot route, also rated 511C. Astro Man is incredibly famous, by the way. You look up some pictures, it's a really cool-looking route. Way back in 1987, Peter Croft had stunned the climbing world by free-soloing both routes in a single day. No one had repeated that feat in 20 years. I think I talked about that in the History of Climbing video on the Vertical Thoughts channel. If you're interested in watching that, you probably should watch it. It's really good. Of the two climbs, Astro Man is significantly harder and more serious, more physically taxing, and more insecure. Only one other guy had free soloed Astro Man, Dean Potter, in 2000. Still climbing hard at age 43, Potter has recently specialized in combining hard routes with wingsuit base jumping. Also, super bonkers. Look up videos of Dean Potter. It's nuts. He was another influential free soloist I looked up to as a role model. On September 19th, I free soloed both Astro Man and the Rostrum. I'd climbed both routes before roped up with partners, but I couldn't say that I had either route dialed. I was glad that day to find no one else on either climb. I didn't tell anyone beforehand what I was going to try. I just showed up and did them. They went really well. I felt in control the whole day on both climbs. In my Bible, I noted only September 19th, 2007, Astro Man 511C solo, Rostrum 511C. I added a smiley face after Astro Man, but no other comments. It's interesting how little it seems to mean to him. At the same time, it's astronomically important to him, but he doesn't take the time to celebrate necessarily like most people would, make a post on Instagram. Now, this was in 2007, granted, so it's a different time, but today I believe it would still be the same for him. He would maybe feel obligated to share something with his fans or supporters, but in his mind, the celebration takes place in the act itself of doing it. Like he says, I just showed up and did them. Good job. Great. For me, I'd be calling it a newspaper. Anyways, we're different people. That's what we're learning here today. That evening, I called a friend. It might have been Chris Widener, and told him about my day. That's how the word got out. Freaking Chris spilled the beans. Classic. I'll admit that the double solo stirred up a certain buzz in the valley, as climbers call Yosemite, but only among the hardcore locals. In my mind, the fact that I did both routes in one day, just as Peter Croft had, wasn't particularly significant. That is crazy significant. It's crazy to me that it's not crazy significant to him. I'm using the word crazy a little too much, but the fact that he doesn't, I don't know, place any importance on kind of the ritualistic aspect of just repeating what Peter Croft had done. Historically, very significant achievement on his end, anyways. What was significant was committing to doing them at all, and succeeding gave me the confidence to start imagining even bigger free solos. So to him, the significance comes to just the very base root of what he's doing. It's just being willing and able to participate in the sport of free soloing at all is what is significant to him. 5 months later, in February 2008, I drove to Indian Creek in southern Utah. The creek is a mecca of short, beautiful cracks on solid Winegate sandstone. I was in terrific form there, climbing roped up with various partners. It might be Wingate sandstone, by the way. I onsitted the hardest routes, getting up them on my first try without falling. Routes up to 513B or C, but I've been climbing so much I developed a bad case of tendinitis in my left elbow. At first, I didn't even know what was wrong. I thought I'd hurt my biceps from sheer overuse. But at the creek, after only 2 or 3 pitches, the pain was so intense I'd have to shut it down. 1 day on, then 2 days off. I'd go mountain biking with my friend Cedar Wright, just trying to mix it up. But it drove me crazy not to be able to climb more. Weirdly enough, by contributing to my general angst, the tendinitis was good for Moonlight Buttress. It takes a certain hunger to be motivated to do something so big. At the creek, I was so fit and climbing so well, but I was also hungry to do more, because I had to limit my days on rock to a lot fewer than I wanted. And Moonlight Buttress was a project I've been dreaming of for years, ever since Bill Ramsey and I had climbed it a few years before, which is why I found myself in Zion, sitting in my van all day in the rain on March 30th and 31st, 2008, visualizing everything that could possibly happen on that amazing route the next day. All the soloing I had done during the previous several years had taught me the value of preparation, but I'd never prepared for a free solo as diligently as I did for Moonlight. Rehearsing the moves on top rope for 2 days until I had every sequence lodged in my memory was crucial. But so were those days of just sitting and thinking, imagining every placement of each hand and foot all the way up the huge route, visualizing everything that could happen. In a real sense, I performed the hard work of that free solo during the days leading up to it. Once I was on the climb, it was just a matter of executing. The dampness and sandiness of the lower part of the wall had addled me somewhat. And at first, I was just confused as to whether I was actually en route. I wasn't truly scared, just hesitant and uncertain. In retrospect, I think I projected my anxiety about the whole project as I sat in my van visualizing it for 2 days, onto the start of the climb. Now I was driven upward by pure excitement, which always had an edge of anxiety about it. The second pitch is a clean splitter crack, and once I got onto that, I knew I was en route. There's really only one line to the summit, and after that second pitch, the rock dried out, and the sandiness pretty much disappeared. As I climbed higher, I steadily gained confidence. The 511 rightward traverse on the third pitch went like clockwork. By the time I got to rocker blocker ledge, it was game on. I was making the moves with what felt like perfect execution. As I started off rocker blocker toward the tricky boulder problem, the scenario of coming off and trying to stick the ledge was in the back of my mind. But I was moving efficiently, and as soon as I made the little upward lurch and seized the crucial handhold, I knew I wouldn't come off. My confidence surged even higher. Above the rocker blocker, I started up the 180-foot 512D inside corner that's the crux of the whole route. That stern rating doesn't derive from any single particularly hard move, but from the strenuous continuity. I don't know why that word just broke my brain right now. But from the strenuous continuity of the whole thing. And here's where my preparation paid off. I started up the corner stemming, placing the edges of my feet carefully on tiny wrinkles of sandstone on either side of the central crack, then moving smoothly upward from one hold to the next. The wall here is dead vertical, so you have to gauge those holds precisely, but I remembered every one from my top rope rehearsal. Also, as I had expected, the wall here, which is protected from the rain by a small roof far above, was totally dry. I was able to rest here and there on small holds as I stemmed up the first 80 feet of the corner. But then I had the shift from stemming to lie backing. Now I grabbed the edge of the crack with both hands, leaned back to the left, and walked my feet up the opposite wall till the soles of my shoes were only 2 feet below my lower hand. Lie backing feels somewhat unnatural. The whole key is moving upward is the stability provided by the pole, with your hands counterbalancing the push with your feet. The position you're in is almost like sitting in a rowing shell and pulling hard on the oars. You methodically alternate feet and hand movements as you inch up the crack. Yes, it's strenuous, but a clean lieback feels solid and secure. If the edges of the crack aren't sharp or are flared outward, though, let me just start that one over for you. Sorry about that. I've read, we're 19 pages in and I don't read too much, so maybe my reading endurance is a little trash here. I need to train a little more. If the edges of the crack aren't sharp or flared outward, though, or the wall you place your feet on is too slick, liebacking is pretty scary. You feel like you could pop loose and plunge toward the void in an involuntary backflip. That's very powerful imagery, an involuntary backflip. Sounds fun. But if you don't get your feet high enough, they can slip off and your hands holding the crack become worthless. Either way, you're headed down. The trick of that last 100 feet in the corner is not to let the overall pump get to you. You can't lie back forever because the strain on your arms keeps mounting. That's what pump is all about. If you get too pumped, you simply can't hold on any longer. If I'd been climbing with a rope or even with a harness and some gear, I could always have clipped into something, hung for a while, and regained the strength in my arms. Bad style, of course, but better than coming off. But free soloing, I had no choice. I needed to get to the top of the corner before the pump took over. By now I was in full game-on mode, so I scurried up the corner as well as I had done on top rope rehearsal. Didn't even come close to losing it. My only concession to the airiness of being up there without a rope or gear was that I cranked my feet a little higher than I had on my 2 top rope rehearsals. That meant more arm pump, but it felt a bit more secure. The 3 pitches above the crux are rated 512A, 512A, and 512B. Pretty darn hard, but well within my abilities. In fact, those pitches follow a perfect finger crack. It was here that the true glory of free soloing came home to me. Sticking my first digits into the crack, I turned them slightly into perfect finger locks. And it felt bomber. Love it. The verbiage is beautiful, by the way. It's a good read. Like half of 2 fingers. Oh no, sorry, I skipped something. At any given moment, I had only a tiny amount of skin inside the crack, like half of 2 fingers. And my toes weren't on holds, but just pasted on the wall. So little of my body was actually touching the rock. There was an air all around me. I felt like I was stepping into the void, and yet it was an amazing sensation. I was 100% certain I wouldn't fall off, and that certainty was what kept me from falling off. Now that's interesting, right? Or at least it is to me. Being 100% certain, it's pretty rare for me that I'm 100% certain of something unless it's something tangible that I can see right in front of me, right? And even then you tend to have doubts, but he was 100% certain he wouldn't fall off, and that's why he didn't. And here, though I didn't pause to look around and take in the view, the beauty of Zion came home. The whole world of the canyon is all red and green. Red for the rocks, green for the forest. There's the Virgin River winding so far below. No traffic sounds that far up, just peace and quiet. Zion is beautiful, by the way. If you've never been up there, he describes it very well. It's just, the beauty of Zion came home. The whole world of the canyon. His word choice, his diction is very specific. And it is a whole world, Zion, in and of itself. You feel like you're just stepped outside of society for a moment. A final 510D pitch leads to the summit. Tough enough in its own right, but I climbed as smoothly as the pitches just before. All the feelings of vague doubt I had started up on the route had vanished. I really should learn to turn my phone on silent during these, right? These are long sessions, so this is the first one. We're still hashing things out, okay? My apologies. Hope you're enjoying this so far, though. Almost before I knew it, I stood on top of the cliff. I checked my time against the iPod. 1 hour and 23 minutes. It was the speed record, as well as my first free solo ascent. Standing there, as I unlaced my shoes, I was super psyched. He had gone Super Saiyan on us real quick. Though I still had to hike down barefoot. Rock shoes are so tight that it's excruciating to hike in them. Then circle back around and wade the river again to get my approach shoes and pack. It's never smooth sailing off into the rainbow. I was totally jazzed. During that hour and 23 minutes, I'd climbed as well as I ever had in my life. And they talked about this in free solo as well, but free soloing is perfection. I mean, you have to climb perfectly. And so while Alex Honnold may not be the strongest climber in the world, physically, I believe he's mentally the strongest climber in the world, but he does achieve perfection, which is pretty rare, I think, in sports in general. On April 1st, 2008, no one witnessed Alex's climb of Moonlight Buttress. As with Astroman and the Rostrum, Alex had told no one what he was planning to do, though he had confided in Chris Widener that the free solo was something he'd like to do sometime. Now, after the climb, he called Widener and told him about his glorious day. Widener told others, and the news spread like wildfire. Because the climb had taken place on April Fool's Day, a substantial portion of the climbing cognoscenti wondered at first whether the whole thing was a joke or even a hoax. But within days, the tide had swung in favor of Alex's veracity. I like that I didn't know that it took place on April Fool's Day. Or rather, I did, but I didn't put the two together. On the website supertopo.com, climbers who understood the magnitude of the ascent weighed in. Holy living fuck, wrote one. Unreal, blogged another. Just the thought gives me chills. There were also commenters who saluted the climb as inspirational. Amazing accomplishment, Alex. Reading this post motivated me to push way harder today than I would have otherwise. And those who knew about Alex's previous solos of the Rostrum and Astroman tipped their caps. That is unbelievable. I would have said impossible, but since it has Alex's name on it, just insane. That's a beautiful quote. I would have said impossible, but since it has Alex's name on it, just insane. Not impossible, but totally crazy. And congrats on the send. Keep cranking. Sorry, that one's really generic. The other ones were pretty profound. I like it, though. It's positive. On April 6th, Jeff Lowe, who with Mike Weiss had made the first ascent of Moonlight Buttress way back in 1971, posted on Super Topo that he had always known the route would go free, and he had attempted to free it before Peter Croft and Johnny Woodward beat him to the prize in 1992. But I never saw far enough into the crystal ball, Lowe added, to foresee Alex's inspired leap of faith. Great job, Alex. Always take care, as I know you do. Now, something on this really quick, on Jeff's words. Put yourself in Jeff's shoes for a moment, having helped to establish this route, knowing the difficulty and knowing the risks involved and associated with it. Do you think you would feel a tinge of like, what the hell is that kid doing? You know, like having heard the news and having to be able to fully comprehend this route. Do you think he felt a little bit like, why would he do that? It's just a thought that I had. You know, obviously he reacted positively, and you can't stop Alex Honnold from free soloing, so you might as well hop on board the train, right, and support him. But just something I've always wondered, if someone who really comprehends the things that he's doing, like Tommy Caldwell did, what kind of emotional battle they face in wanting to be like, just grab him and shake him and be like, can you not, please, can you stop free soloing, you freaking crazy guy? I don't know, something to think about. Along with this encomium from one of America's stellar climbing pioneers, for the first time in a larger media world, including the directors at Sender Films, sat up and took notice. A new phenom of the climbing world had emerged on the stage. At 22, Alex Honnold was just getting started. That's it. That's chapter 1. I love it. I think it's a fantastic book. I think it's extremely well written. The diction's very specific and very climber-esque. You know, I'm really enjoying reading this so far. I want to know what you guys think about this. I've never done this kind of thing before. I actually used to read a lot, but I don't commonly pick up books and read as much as I should, and this is kind of my leap back into this. So that's chapter 1. I believe there's 11 chapters. I'll verify that for you now. 11 chapters, roughly 250 pages. I want to get through all of it. It's going to be 11 episodes. So let me know what you thought of this. Let me know your thoughts so far on this book. I'm infatuated. I think it's wonderful. I'm excited for chapter 2, which is a very private hell. I'm excited to see what this book has in store for me and to learn more about Alex Honnold and his mindset, his justifications, and his adventures, really being alone on the wall. So that's freaking it, man. Listen to Vertical Thoughts. I'm going to be posting this on Wednesday, so I guess that would be Wednesday the 23rd will be when this goes up, and hopefully when you're listening to it. If you're listening to it after, that's okay as well. And hopefully the next one will be the following Wednesday, and we'll get through this in 11 weeks together. So let me know what you think about the book. Let me know what you think about the idea. Listen to Vertical Thoughts. Freaking love you guys, and I'll see you next week.